All right, so everyone, welcome to ICALA. My name is Aska Hisa. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement. Oh my goodness. Here we are, in person, masked, being careful. We're in it together, we're surviving together. We are here for Queer Survivance, an event in partnership with USC's Roski School of Art and Design. This was a proposal by Amelia Jones, noted art historian. All the titles: Robert A. Day Professor of Art and Design, Vice Dean of Academics and Research, Chair of Critical Studies at Roski, and the curator of the important exhibition, Queer Communion, Ron Athey, right here in our galleries. This is the final week of the exhibition. So please tell all your friends who are in town to come see the show, as well as Kenneth Tam, Silent Spikes, in our project room. There is one last tour of the exhibition over the holiday weekend on September 4th at 3 p.m., so please RSVP and join us. It'll be with Amelia and Ron. We have just captured the exhibitions actually in VR, in virtual reality, so there is the chance to be able to visit the shows even after they have physically left the building. So, housekeeping, please keep your masks on during the event. Thank you all for coming and supporting in all your ways. And finally, before we begin, I just want to thank Ron Athey and Amelia Jones.
All right. I think we should be thanking you. I'm super thrilled that the show is here. It just wouldn't have been right for it not to be in Los Angeles. So yeah, this is also a Roski talk. It's the first in our series. Please go on the USC Roski website to find out about the scintillating future program for the Roski talks this season. So I'm just gonna say a couple, well, it's a page about, because I never say just a couple of words, about the idea of queer survivance and why I thought this would make a really interesting but also politically important panel in conjunction with the show. So it really is inspired by engaging with Ron's work and watching the way in which not just survival, but joy and pleasure and jouissance is produced and engaged in throughout the work. So I thought it would be interesting to generate a discussion amongst a group of queer folks of different generations and places, although mostly LA-based, who have created or participated in communities of joy and creativity in order to survive the precarities of late 20th and early 21st century capitalist life in the US. Queer survivance is a theme respectfully borrowed from indigenous theory, and it's linked to the organizing logic of the show Queer Communion, Ron Athey, wherein the photographs, drawing, props, diaries, videos, etc., linked to the life and performance practice of Ron, are organized according to the communities that Ron has organized or played a role in. And I hope that when you go around the show, you'll feel the energy of Ron's savagely joyous practice and capacity to live creatively in spite of the crushing weight of capitalist regimes. So this is kind of what I was thinking in terms of borrowing this idea of survivance. The term survivance was popularized in the early 2000s by Gerald Weisenor, an indigenous theorist, in a book called Survivance, an edited volume. Queer survivance must be differentiated from indigenous survivance, obviously, not the least in the structural differences in how state power is wielded in relation to each community. In organizing the panel, I nonetheless borrowed survivance from indigenous theory, drawn by the capacity to delineate more nuanced way to understand indigenous peoples' continuing vitality in the face of centuries of violence. And so it's not the same, but it's just that distilled idea of what oppressed communities do when it's difficult to get by. You know, do you just survive, or do you create community and joy and positive modes of survivance? Most importantly then, while survival is a concept tied to the Western idea of the coherent individual self, survivance understands our interrelatedness. As Weisner puts it, original communal responsibility greater than the individual, greater than original sin, but not accountability, animates the practice and consciousness of survivance. In aligning queer with survivance, I'm inspired by years of knowing Ron and studying his work and relationships, the building and expansion of communities of lovers, friends, and co-performers, people otherwise hounded to the margins of art's capitalist systems, but who find ways to play, create, and love together. This is in brief what I hope we will explore together tonight. So thank you so much for being here. It's exciting to see such a big crowd. And I'm going to introduce first our moderator, Jeanne Vaccaro. I'm so appreciative that Jeanne agreed to take that role. I think you're particularly well suited to navigating this territory. Jeanne Vaccaro is a scholar, curator we're lucky enough to have at the One Archives of Gay and Lesbian History at USC, and she teaches transgender history and theory in the Department of Gender and Sexuality Studies at USC. She first organized the exhibition at the One called Foucault on Acid, an exploration of how desert and archival imaginaries shape the intersection of sexuality and race. With Jennifer Doyle and Jamila James, she is curating Scientia Sexualis, an exhibition centering Black feminist, trans, decolonial contemporary art, negotiating the legacies of sexual science, and that will be here at the ICA. Very exciting part of the Getty Foundation's 2024 Pacific Standard Time platform. Jeanne, take it away.
Thank you, Amelia. It's so nice to see so many people, and in this moment of being deconditioned or reconditioning, going from online to being in person, this couldn't be a better conversation and group of people to have assembled to think about what it means to be bodies in space together. So I'm really, really looking forward to what I think will be a rich and exciting, maybe a set of instructions, a pathway moving us from wherever we are to wherever we're going. So just a quick kind of sense of how the night is going to be organized. We have a couple of folks who have to be with us virtually, perhaps a sign of the ongoing times. And so I'm going to introduce people before they speak, but all of the artists are going to have a chance to share a little bit about their practice before we have a conversation and then open things up to the audience. And I wanted to just begin with a very brief quote from Anne Svatkovich, she's a queer theorist and scholar of affect and emotion. And she writes, "The queer performance creates publics by bringing together live bodies in space. And the theatrical experience is not just about what's on stage, but also who is in the audience creating community." And so I'm going to ask all of the artists to kind of think with us about this challenge of maintaining connection, intimacy, belonging in this era of this pandemic, which I think, you've seen the meme, Corona is the virus, capitalism is the pandemic, and that's so much what this term survivance, I think, Amelia has gleaned from to think about precarity and as well as joy together. So as we think about the physical spaces that have been lost, that we seek to maintain and think through survival, what has been left empty, and how we can repopulate these spaces, I hope all the artists will share with you something about their practice and what survivance and survival means to them. And we're going to begin actually with a presentation that was pre-recorded by Madison Moore, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here with us, but Madison Moore is a cultural critic, a DJ, and assistant professor of queer studies at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Trained in performance studies, their research, teaching, and critical creative practice converges at the intersections of Black queer aesthetics, fashion, queer nightlife, popular music, contemporary art theory, and visual culture. Raised in Ferguson, Missouri, he holds a PhD in American Studies from Yale University. Madison is the author of Fabulous, The Rise of the Beautiful Eccentric. Fabulousness, they argue, is positioned as a vibrant aesthetic practice, and the book takes the reader on a journey through Vogue balls, Instagram, nightclubs, street fashion, weaving together autobiography and cultural analysis. And so I'm going to play a recording that Madison has made just for us, and then we will move to Ron, and then Judy, and then Pony before we have a conversation. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Madison Moore and I am an assistant professor of gender, sexuality, and women's studies at Virginia Commonwealth University. The semester has just kicked off. I'm in my 4th year here, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to be in Los Angeles personally to be able to share this experience with you, but I am delighted to be able to offer at least something to the conversation to help us think about and through the value of queer survivance. I've been asked today to talk to you a little bit about my practice and how this connects to questions of queer survivance. And I guess I would say to start that, the question that grounds my work that I always think about as maybe a starting point is, how are art and beauty created in states of duress? How are art and beauty created in states of duress? And by that duress, I mean the systems and structures and processes that regularly work to annihilate queer and trans communities of color in particular. And I'm interested in how these communities push through that annihilation, push through that strategic displacement through the aesthetic. So in particular through the body, through fashion, through style, and also through different kinds of queer world making, as you might see, for example, at a Vogue ball or at a nightclub. So I do this in my first book, Fabulous, The Rise of the Beautiful Eccentric, which is really focused on style practices of queer and trans folks of color, and really looking at what does it mean for these folks to stretch out and expand in a way that is hyper visible when it's much easier to sort of not exist, much easier to sort of to mute yourself, to flatten yourself out. And what I found is that for these communities, style or exuberant style or kind of fabulousness is an articulation of self, and it is an embrace of yourself, and it is a kind of demand for presence when you live in a world and in a body that is constantly under attack, where your very existence is subject to legislation and debate. And so for me, thinking about that duress, I'm borrowing here from, what Christina Sharp might call the endurance of anti-blackness, and what Claudia Rankine describes as the condition of black life as one of mourning. But instead of thinking about that mourning, I'm interested here in survivance and in thriving, and how these communities thrive otherwise and in the face of a kind of constant erasure. My new book project is called A Manifesto for Queer Nightlife, and it is a project that builds on 15 years experience producing events and parties and going out myself. Well, I've been going out for more than 15 years, but actively creating these spaces and sort of doing them through music as well. And that project is really focused on the queer rave, the queer dance floor, thinking about these spaces as spaces of world making, as spaces of possibility, as spaces of not utopia, because I don't believe in that clubs are safe spaces because they are not safe spaces. Indeed, they are not. But thinking about them as elsewheres, right? Thinking of them, club spaces, as new frontiers, as spaces without GPS coordinates that are off the map. And so that project draws on my experience, on the dance floor as a raver, as a partier, as a dancer. It draws on my experience producing these kind of events for folks, and it also draws on my experience as a DJ. So in addition to my scholarship in writing and creative practice and teaching, I'm also a DJ. And people often ask me, how do you teach and DJ and write all these things, and how do you navigate that? And for me, they're not different practices. It's really all the same thing. It's sort of about pedagogy. It's a kind of way of bringing the classroom into the DJ booth and bringing the DJ booth into the classroom, right? So I guess maybe the best way to kind of share with you how I'm trying to think about music and joy and thriving and survivance in the context of queer nightlife, which are spaces of possibility and political spaces. One thing I often tell my students when they go to the gay bar is you should realize that you have the luxury of going to these spaces now, but 50 years ago or however long they weren't legal necessarily. So I'd like to think about the political sort of heft of these spaces as well. So instead of only talking about it, I think I want to kind of show you how I bring these worlds together.
I'd be lying if I can smell your scent like a trace that I follow. I might seem deranged, shallow, and hollow.
So, in addition to my scholarship and producing parties and teaching and writing, I'm also a techno DJ. And I love techno because it is music that, to me, really captures the sort of heft of living in the now, living in the present. It is music that is impactful. It's happening right now. It's hard to ignore that this is happening in your face. And so for me, I think that the dance floor, the queer night, these are spaces that trade on a sense of nowness, a sense on the presentness, a sense of the itinerant, a sense of that all we have is right now. And you know, I think that becomes even more clear, especially within the context of the pandemic, and you know, the way that people maybe have taken nightlife for granted. And of course, it's the first thing that was taken away as lockdowns sort of spread globally. So yeah, I hope that this gives you a little bit of a sense through how I'm sort of looking at and thinking about queer world making and thinking about the possibilities of thriving in a system that doesn't want you to exist. These are spaces that are noisy, they're loud, they're seizing space right now. It's what Jeremy Gilbert calls a kind of unruly society. And so that's my offering for you today. And I think I'll see some of you maybe in the seminar. And otherwise, please feel free to reach out to me via email, and have a great rest of the conversation.
Thank you for that beautiful contribution. It was so great to see their fingers tapping around as we think about tactility and ephemerality and nightlife. So I am going to now ask Ron to come up and share something, some little snippet from his practice. I hope that you all have had a chance to walk through the exhibition. And by way of introduction, because this is about survivance and community, I actually want to read something about Ron from this incredible catalog that Andy Campbell and Amelia Jones have generated. It's such an important document and will be an incredible part of preserving Ron's legacy. And I was so struck by this moment in the introduction that Amelia wrote that I really wanted to share it with you, because it speaks to the kind of pollination of the personal across these kind of disciplinary boundaries. So she writes, "Nevertheless, here the historian in me takes over. Ron Athey has not only been one of the major figures in Euro-American performance art of the past 30 years. Ron Athey was not only the excoriated thorn in Jesse Helms' side, called out by the senator on the floor of the U.S. Congress in 1994. Ron Athey has not only been a wrench in the works of capitalism, producing viscerally embodied performances that defy easy categorization, display, and art historical codification. Ron Athey is not only a key actor in the glam, punk, post-punk Los Angeles music scene of the 1980s. Ron Athey is not only an aficionado of BDSM clubs and a hot go-go dancer on the queer club scene. Ron Athey is not only one of the most important poets and performers of the apocalypse known as the AIDS crisis. Ron Athey is not only an impresario who, with collaborators such as Vaginal Davis, has organized cabaret and performance events around the world. Ron Athey is not only a charismatic movie star of radical queer alternative cinema. Ron Athey is not only the living embodiment of the most stunning queer appropriation of tattooing. Ron Athey is not only a sage and the friend and mentor to many a queer artist, intellectual, and creative person, whether lost or found, whom attached to him with awe, reverence, affection, and or love. He is all of those things and many, many more." And you can all read the official bio, but this speaks so loudly to the love that's happening among the people who have created this space. So, Ron, I'm going to bring you up and...
I'll just keep having water there. this summer in Los Angeles, I feel fully represented. So, so then rather than talking about a specific work, I want to talk about a library and the background to that library. For 18 years, I was with a lot of hyphens, assistant to the editor-in-chief of the LA Weekly, as well as I had like calendar writing duties and freelance writing duties, but my main job was opening mail for 3 editors, and I opened the books for the book editor. So I took every book I ever wanted that was new. We traded in the ones we didn't want to and had books where we could buy like first editions and rare books. So I ended up with more than 6,000 books over that time, and it's the only thing I ever thought. I collect books. So I had so many books, then suddenly I wanted to be, the LA Weekly became corporate and awful and merged with 14 papers, and always went to like weekend mean seminars for the management. They would come back mean, and suddenly it wasn't a family anymore. So I just kept reducing the books. I moved to England, so I reduced to about 1,000 that were precious to me, and then I thought I would, suddenly my landlord died. I was getting one of those fake owner move-in evictions. The reason I have an archive is because I had a 2-bedroom house with a detached garage for $600 for 30 years. So I could just box it. I didn't have to think like, how the fuck am I gonna pay for storage or, things like that. So this, evictions are gnarly, and I wasn't raised by parents. I have no family. There is no number to call when anything like that goes down. So it was devastating to think, wow, rents have tripled and quadrupled and 5-tupled since that rent control contract. There will be no equivalent. Everyone Airbnbs and Bs, their tool shed at that point. So there's no solution. And then being a non-driver. So kind of a double combo. John Tane was at the Getty then, and Amelia. They both kind of closed in on me in a 1-2 sort of thing. And just to, they just couldn't believe some of the books I was posting, some which I really wasn't going to sell. It was just some grandstanding. But I felt pathetic, so I was like having a public sale. And I did pass on some excellent books, but it kind of shined a light on my situation and that I was taking it the wrong way. I was ready just to bail, like sell everything and move on. So that wasn't that long ago. That was about 4 years ago. So really I was at the wall one more time of thinking, is this fucking worth it? Why do I have to do 15 backflips to do one little thing? So what ended up playing out, it did seem like the right decision that in 2015 I moved back to stupid LA from whence I came, and dove back into things that were going on now. So the paper archive that will go to the Getty after wherever the last leg of this tour is, that's a biggie, and I'm kind of glad that I still have control of all my props, costumes, things like that. So I just want to say how that started. I'm not a fancy artist who got a fancy show, and it's a hardship to have a show unless you just let it be what it is, And I'm I think people use different terms now, but I always say I have the disease of grandiosity. Like everything's more is more with me. So sometimes my practice is bigger than me. I was long in talks to do a Cephalus Monster at Red Cat, and we decided to tag it to the show. And for me, it's important, especially coming out of, I concealed for decades that I was part of premature ejaculation and Christian death because of the cult following of death rock goth of that era. So just to have these really strong other points in my work and scenes that I've been in and people that I've been affiliated with, it's important for me to have brand new work also in this showing. The newest being the Asclepion, the kind of the Ark of the Covenant with glory holes that's in the projection room. To be honest, after a dress rehearsal plus, where I really did get in everything like the gunk, et cetera, and then 4 nights in a row, I'm depleted. And I don't know if I should overeat or cry or smoke more weed, or definitely don't want more whiskey. So that was a miracle work with Opera Povera again, which like really brought this performance to life, and the initial music is done by Sean, so it was just creating it live and upping the ante and adding Carmina, who's somebody that I collaborate with and do vocal training with for years now. So I'm high on that and crashing, and I'm still really mad the pageant didn't happen on August 1st. So I almost was going to show it tonight. Pasiphae, Witch Queen of Crete, a glory hole origin story. I think I'm going to show it at USC tomorrow. I just say, I understand fucking microbes. I was 16, I worked at the Jonas Salk Institute. Like, I understand the time we're in, but also if it's just never going to end, we have to figure out how we keep living with it. I don't want to be at home. So that's why that particularly stuck in my side, because I won't put the things away either. I have a pageant worth of stuff in my living room, which is everything that wasn't in the show. And I did think of a new way to describe the Messianic Remains costumes. It's appropriating Kenneth Anger or shabby Egyptology. So I thought that's a section that's not represented. That's really it. So yeah, I haven't let go of that disappointment, but you can't have everything. I can't go down the ye old rugged crossroad for sure, but I guess looking at 40 years of work, you just think there was this period in the early 80s where when I was imaging work in my head, and I just kept saying, not Jesus, no, not Jesus, it just couldn't go around it, so I had to go through it for about 20 years. So I'm enjoying the sort of perverted myths, I guess, at this point. Yeah, I think we're going to come back to me, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. Or there.
I feel like the timing of that worked out perfectly. So we're going to do some technical magic, hopefully, and we're going to bring in Judy Sisneros, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but she's going to share with us on Zoom now a couple of photographs representing her practice. And so I'm going to try to do this in a way that seems really seamless. And I'm going to go on my Zoom. Okay. And so let me introduce Judy, who is an activist, photographer, and curator based in Los Angeles. She was a member of ACT UP Los Angeles and was active on the Women's Committee, Prisoners with AIDS Committee, and Agitating Legal Committee, among other work. Active from 1987 to 95, ACT UP Los Angeles defined itself in groundbreaking ways, especially the Women's Committee broadening the disease definitions with the CDC. Cisneros became a member of Queer Nation in Los Angeles and was involved in protests around Hollywood Awards. In 1994, she co-founded the Los Angeles Dyke March and continued to participate. Oh, she wants to be joined. She wants us to admit her. Okay, let's see. And I'll just say that we have quite a lot of Judy's papers at the One Archives. So let's see, Judy, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, great.
Hi.
Hi, Judy. Well, there's a packed audience. Maybe the audience will clap and let you know.
Oh, thanks. You're so sweet.
So
Makes me feel a little better, because I've been through
they're here,
a
Judy.
little bit of kind of a big flu the last few days. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm glad to be participating this way. Okay, you could go ahead and put up the first photo, and I'll just, talk for a minute or so before that I start addressing the photos. So, okay to start now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Hi everyone. Hi Ron, Pony, Amelia, Aska, everyone who's attending. Again, I'm sorry. not quite 100%. I've been dealing with the flu, but I'm glad to be participating this way, and glad to be actually very happy to be showing you some of my photos. One has never been seen, and so I've been taking photos on and off for 30 years. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. I'm from Central California. In the mid-'70s, I moved to Northern California for about 10 years or so, spent most of the 80s in punk rock, San Francisco, and then ended up in LA probably, I would say, permanently around 1989. So from there, I got involved with some activism, mainly pro-choice, and connected with some ACT UP LA members there. And actually, a friend of mine in San Francisco was the first woman to die of AIDS in San Francisco. They didn't call it AIDS at the time, but it was eventually, that's what it was named. And so, so when I joined ACT UP, it was really intense. It was great. It was very doing meetings all the time, every night. And I was actually working full time when I joined ACT UP. Actually, throughout all the activism I've done, and I'll fill you in on that a little bit too, I was always working a full-time job. So it was difficult, but I don't think I could do it today. But back then, somehow I had the energy to do it. And someone I worked with sold me a camera, a Nikon film camera, and it was, I started taking photos. I do have some ACT UP photos from that time period. They're not in any of these that I'm going to show you, but I do have some, and they'll be included in an exhibit that I'm going to have next year at the one Dirty Looks and the one Archives are providing an exhibit where I'm going to have the opportunity to show the breadth of my queer photography, which has mainly been activism in the first, like in the 90s and 2000s, it kind of started changing a little bit, but a lot of Dyke March photos. So basically, just to back up a little bit, I was involved in ACT UP simultaneously. About a year after my involvement with ACT UP, I got involved with Queer Nation. Queer Nation was created out of ACT UP members. ACT UP was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, the Los Angeles chapter specifically. And I guess I should be a little bit, I'm going to try not to presume that everyone there knows these groups, because I'm presuming I'm speaking to a younger audience. But it was a direct action group created to fight institutional homophobia and demand treatment for people with AIDS, which was a huge problem in the queer and people of color communities. So from there, Queer Nation, which was dedicated to focusing on fighting homophobia, women broke off and formed a group called Puss in Boots, which was kind of like the LA version of the Lesbian Avengers, which was a New York street activist, lesbian activist group. And then that only lasted about a year before we formed the Los Angeles Dyke March Committee for a few years. We did that in West Hollywood. I left that organization, other people took over, another group started in Silver Lake. So anyway, during this time period of the late 90s, I picked up the camera again, and I have some photographs from a club called Meow Mix, which was an offshoot of the Meow Mix, well-known, legendary queer women's club in New York, but there was Meow Mix that started in LA. Also photographs from Brick Tops, which was called a Weimar era type of club at the Parlor Room. That was a Vaginal Davis Club, legendary performance artist. And so we can go ahead and show the first photograph, Jeanne, and then I'll go ahead and start talking about.
Is it tongues? That's what I have up.
Tongues, yes,
Great.
Tongues.
Yep.
Tongues is an organization, we actually still exist, but it's pretty inactive. But it started, so I would say circa 1999, maybe 2000, of primarily lesbian Latina activists. Some of those women had been involved in Latinx, we didn't call it that at the time, but arts group called Que Viva, and that was a co-gender, you know, I don't know if I should even be using that term today, but at the time it was considered a co-gender Latinx arts group. And then women formed this other group called Tongues. And the primary, I guess, goal was to advocate for women, Latinx women in the arts, via, you know, political means, but mainly through a zine by the same name, Tongues, where members published poetry, stories, photography, recipes even, and the co-founders, some of the co-founders, and I'm sorry, I'll not remember everyone because I wasn't there at the founding, but Alma Lopez, who you should see in the photograph at the microphone, an artist who is a professor at UCLA, and Stacy Macias, she's in the photo there. Geez, I should have brought, I didn't know I wouldn't be able to see it, otherwise I could say she's, you know, third from the left or, you know, second from the right. But anyway, she's there, and let's see, Raquel Gutierrez and Claudia Rodriguez, I believe, were co-founders. Both of those individuals had left the group by the time we went to Mexico. So basically, the photo that you're seeing is about half of the group of queer identified women, mainly with Tongues, who we went to Mexico City to participate in the Marcha Lesbica. This is 2006. So this is a lesbian march, which actually was the largest at the time lesbian march definitely in Mexico, possibly in the global South at the time. And so women, obviously the main organizers were in Mexico City, but some of the women in Tongues actually, I believe, proposed the march. Elma contributed the poster for the march, which is on file at both the One Archives and at the Mazer Archives. And Christina Serna, who's also in that photograph, she's a co-founder, and she was the main portrait in that photograph. So what you're seeing here is the day of the march, and it was a rainy day. It was at the Plaza de la Revolucion. And so there was some interesting dialogue that was going on once we arrived that we didn't really expect, but we had to talk because, well, we had a meeting the day before in a Quaker Center, and basically there were issues of queer identity that were not really agreed upon between the Mexican feminists and the North American lesbians. So, but basically I spent time taking as many photos as I could, meetings, the march, and hotel room. So I just, you know, some more of those photos will be at the exhibit. But the main reason is that I wanted to show this photo to show that there were lesbian activists from Los Angeles who were connecting with women south of the border. Besides Mexican activists, there were women that came from other parts of Latin America and South America. And, you know, you don't hear about this in you know, queer corporate media. So that's a reason why I wanted to show this photo that took place. And then the next year, there was a conference where many of those women came to Los Angeles to continue dialogue. And can we just go ahead and go to the next photo?
This looks like Dykes on Bikes kind of thing.
Okay, so this is the 2008 Los Angeles Dyke March. By that time, there was a West Hollywood Dyke March that had started, and the people who originally started or participated in the original Los Angeles Dyke March, which was in West Hollywood, moved to Silver Lake. And so it was, so the person in the middle there is Katie Child, who actually ran a club on Hyperion called Club Utero. She actually had a partner in running it too. And it was kind of like a club fuck for women, I would say. It was started on Thursdays, but then moved to Sundays. And I guess now should I say what club fuck was? I'm presuming Ron has talked about that, or?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, club fuck, Ron's more the authority than I am, because Ron danced there, and that's the first time I ever saw Ron. But it was a club on Sunday nights, transgressive, at a place called Bosco's, which is now the Black Cat restaurant and bar, and has a history of being a gay bar from the 1960s. There was one of the police raids that happened even before Stonewall. So fast forward to around 1990, 91, there was a club there called Club Fuck. You know, more transgressive music than something that you would find in a bar in West Hollywood. So women, people wanted to start a separate, you know, they still went to Club Fuck, but they wanted to start a separate club from Club Utero. And so Katie, who's in the sidecar there, was one of the club co-runners. She's there with her dog Spike. And, you know, I guess one reason why I wanted to show you, I mean, I like the photograph. I like that it's the Dyke March, but Katie is someone who is not a survivor. Katie passed away within like 2 years after this photo was taken. So, you know, I think part of queer survivance is making sure people who meant a lot to you are not forgotten. So that's, you know, I wanted to show that these activities were happening, that there are people who are not around anymore who I feel contributed to lesbian visibility and the community in some way. Okay, and so we can go on to the next photo, which should be the West Hollywood photo.
Marriage equals commitment?
Yeah, so in the late night, Proposition 8, which was the anti-gay marriage proposition in California, was passed on November 4th, 2008. That was the same election that Barack Obama was elected to his first term as president. So it was, many people considered it a bittersweet election because, most of my friends anyway voted for Obama, but then this anti-gay marriage proposition passed. And for people who don't know California, there's basically, like 5 ways of governing the state: the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, the recalls that happen, and then the propositions. So, I was actually on a flight back from New York on the 4th when I got home. Everyone was like psyched that Obama won, but then I found out Proposition 8 passed, and immediately the next night. So this photograph, I don't know the people in this photograph. I have a lot of photographs from this night of people just going into the street, and there were protests in West Hollywood, for younger people. Typically the big protests in West Hollywood Center at Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights. No, not Crescent Heights. Oh, God. The other main street, right by The bus station. Gosh, okay, I can't remember. Anyway, so for several weeks there were protests, mainly West Hollywood and Silver Lake. Not as big as the protests that happened in 1991, the AB 101 protests, which is a whole nother can of worms I won't go into, but you can research AB 101 protests or riots that went on for a few months. So, I mean, this is basically a photograph showing people in the streets. It doesn't really happen these days, from what I can tell, because there is so much so-called acceptance of the queer community. So people, especially younger people, don't really feel the need to go out into the street and do protests, But I always hope that if there is, that they will. So, so that's why I want to show these photographs, that people, were not shy about going into the street, and there were a lot of women and men, co-gender, trans, non-binary people involved. And also, this was the first set of protests where I even saw a few people, straight people, coming down to join the protests and support, both in West Hollywood and in Silver Lake, which you would never have seen before at any other protests, LGBT protests in West Hollywood. Okay, and we can move along to the next.
Got it.
Okay, so this should be The Smell. The club The Smell, which is an all-ages club that's in downtown LA, just off of 2nd Street. And so this is taking us more into the current times. This is in May of 2019. And there are 3 people who are fairly well known in the community. We've got Frank, the lesbian folk singer, and in the middle is the reason why people went to the Smell that night is J.D. Sampson, who was a member of La Tigra, which was an offshoot of Bikini Kill, a very well-known riot girl band. JD had also formed a band before. Well, this night the band that she formed was the Crickets with another musician that was in a group called Men, after which followed her La Tigra tenure, and then she formed this band, the Crickets, also, and Roddy Bottom from Faith No More was in the band, and Candace Hansen, who I believe identifies as NB, also was there. I was talking to JD. Candace came in. I know Candace from being the drummer for Alice Baggs' band, and also their own band called Yawn. And I thought, wow, this is a perfect moment to capture with 3 butch icons, people who have at one time or still do identify as on the masculine side of queer. And also there's a generational representation here, with Frank being around since, as a performer anyway, since the late 70s when she was in Nervous Gender. With her butch representation, JD, I believe, identifies as NB and butch, and has been around, like I said, from, I would say, the mid-90s to current, when they started with La Tigra, and then Candace on the younger spectrum with Jan and Alice Bagg. And I just wanted to show that generational representation, and the masculine side of artists who have at one time either identified, or some still do, as lesbian to NB, and possibly trans. And I think that should do it if you have any questions.
Judy, I have also your Corona drop-off photo.
My what?
The dropping off groceries during the pandemic.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so that is, that's one of my favorite photos I've taken during COVID. So during COVID, I have been, at least until I got vaccinated, I was pretty much homebound. And this period of time, I have to say, friends really showed up for me. Being older and having had the flu like 3 times in 2019, I was very nervous about going out pre-vaccine. And it really had, I had a great support group of people who would help pick things up for me, and visit me just to say hi. So Cio Sanchez is someone who's been around the punk queer community and just the punk community forever. She was an ex-Go-Go's and Bags roadie, and she was helping me out that day, bringing me, since I don't have the photo, I don't remember, but I think it was possibly cat food. So basically what I did was, when people came to visit or drop things off, I would snap a photo from my balcony. And so I have a record of all this community support. And I made a zine also during the year, kind of as a record, to show how, I had to do something somewhat creative. It was kind of driving me crazy. But so yeah, this is one of my favorite photos from the zine. So I just kind of wanted to show something more recent. The zine is basically point and shoot photographs with just a snapshot camera I have. And so I wanted to show you that I was still trying to do some kind of photography while I'm kind of in this isolation situation. And I think, unless you have any questions, which I presume you do.
I think, Judy, for the sake of the weirdness of technology, this has gone so well. I don't know how, so I think we should cut it while we're ahead. I'm so happy that you could share, especially the beautiful community formation of the past year. And I know there will be questions, and I'll collect them for you, and I will share them with you, and everyone will come and see your exhibition at the One Archives for Dirty Looks next year, and we'll just clap really loudly, and then I'll very rudely leave the Zoom.
Okay, thanks for having me in this format. I can do that. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Judy. Miss you. We have one final presentation before we get to have a conversation with all of you, and that is Ponylee. Do you want to join me up here?
Can I get some water?
You sure can, yes. I'll introduce you. Ponylee has been an active figure in the Los Angeles leather and kink community for 15 years under the service and mentorship of Mistress Melissa. They are a member of Onyx Southwest, a leather club for men of color, founder of the Leather Tent at Dyke Day, LA, and Dyke Day events coordinator, co-creator of Cruise LA at the Eagle, and producer of the first mixed non-binary leather title in Los Angeles. Outside of leather, Pony is the owner of Folklore Salon, and a hair salon that centers its services and story holding around the needs of the LGBTQ community. Pony is an East LA native and lives with their spouse Elliot and their 2 dogs, Butch and Pork Chop.
Hi, everybody. When I read Amelia's text that she forwarded to all of us, so many things were kind of just swirling around in my brain, and hearing everybody tell stories of survival in Los Angeles. As someone who is first generation in LA and came from a really poor family, surviving has always been a part of my life. And I forget about that because I've gone through so much. I was queer the minute I was at the womb. And I didn't know what that language was. I didn't know that it was a name. So trying to survive school and realizing that there wasn't a place for me, I left my home when I was 15. I was creative before I could talk. My family was like, well, that's a really cute hobby, but like, what are you gonna do for a living? And it only drove me more creative and more away from them. And the support wasn't there. I was homeless, I couch surfed, I did everything that I could. I picked up a couple of drug habits. And all in all, I always managed to come out okay. And I don't know if it was by the grace of the universe or something larger that, that I'm here. But the creativity had never stopped. That I didn't have formal training. And I just knew that whatever I got my hands on, I would take apart and I would put it back together. Or I would take it apart and make several different things. I picked up paint cans from Home Depot. I picked up spray cans from the street. I was just digging for any type of material to make anything outside of trying to survive with whatever job I can get at the time. Come in my 20s, that was a really dark period. My transition started to be, my gender transition started to come, surface a little bit more. But somehow I had to find ways to put that in a way that was healthy for me. Eventually, things like self-mutilation, hobbies that I picked up when I was younger became ways and outlets for something that wouldn't go away. I saw Ron's work really early on in my years. I was probably 13, and I had heard about premature ejaculation and Christian death, and I was like, okay, these are things that are comfortable for me because I wasn't alone. But we didn't have access to the internet. I found out of things through word of mouth, through record stores, through some of the kind of like sickest, most unhealthy ways, but I was constantly seeking. Mentorship or things like that didn't happen. But one of the things that gave me comfort as a child was being with my grandparents and my grandparents telling me stories about what it was like for them being in Mexicali, having 13 children, a 2-bedroom house with no pavement, like stories that were so, even that like just spoke of love, even in their bickering. But I was missing such stronger elements. I was missing a connection to my queerness, and I was missing connection to my creativity. And through my life, I just kind of saw those things kind of slowly take form. Collaborating with friends who either had some training or who kind of saw my feralness and just this, were like, I see where you're going with this, now let's like push it. And I love that. And I didn't have discipline, so I looked to the leather community and the kink community to give me a little bit more discipline in my service and in my perspective. And it's something that I hold really dear to my makeup. Till this day, I'm really grateful to work and know some of the most amazing artists from Los Angeles. People come in and out of here, and it's like a network. But not a network as in like you would commercial, but a network of, it's like a fiber that we hold together. And we may disagree, we may bicker, we may challenge each other, but there's always love at the end of it, which is really amazing. I never thought that I would be standing up here talking to y'all for one. But I'm still looking at these pictures. This was a platinum anniversary party that Ron curated the first, right, for Outfest. And I was asked to close the night. And I was like, well, it's going to get messy, so we should close the night. And a lot of things happened that night. And this piece was with a sound group called Sleep Clinic, and some of my kink community, and I think a couple of members from CORE, which was a suspension group that works with hook suspension. So we came up with some visuals. I think the projector is kind of lost in here, but this is right after the dance party and the glory hole and all these other things, and the craft party that was happening next door. So like this was the final one. But Pigs in the Parlor became kind of a revolving door with people that I hold close, and everybody brought in new tricks, let's try this, who cares if it sucks? But it eventually evolved to working with more disciplinary artists like Ron. This is me doing Me and My Happy Place, piercing Divinity for, I think, the meditation walk at Human Resources. So it's been, even though there's times where I didn't have any conceptual ideas that were mine, they were more like visionary of another artist, I felt a need to be present because I had to learn something. I needed something to grasp. Even though my mind was left on pause for myself, that I was walking through the motions of something that my body is going to remember, that my mind would remember, and that would push me into whatever continued practice that I would go into. But yeah, and this is Ron saying, "I want a bolero." And I'm like, "What, are you crazy? This is like a technical moment." I'm like, I don't even know if I have enough stuff, but he, his exuberance coming into the room, and he is just pumped, got me pumped, and then Divinity's yeah. So, everybody was having a good time. And then after, I guess going backwards again, I've been on the Dyke Day committee since 2009. I've been there for over 12 years. I wasn't the original cast, but I was the second year. And the Dyke Day community had always held me, and always challenged me to be better, and always think of our evolving community. Because before we even thought about things like representation, I realized that I was the only person from Los Angeles on that group. And I was the only representation. I'm like, wait, no, I can't be. At the time I was Dyke presenting. I'm like, I can't be the only representation, because LA is made up of so much. So many different people of color, so many different colors. And making that representation happen, and realizing that we all have a hat to throw in the ring, I felt really important to me. So making that a part of, and this was, I think, our last Dyke Day that we had in person. When we first started Dyke Day, there was attendees of 150 people. And then 14 years later, it's gotten over 2,000. So, in that punk ethos, there's if there isn't something for you, make it happen. And whether it's 5 or 10 of you out there, eventually people will follow. And those people are going to be, the part of that mission. So this is the leather tent that I created, where we put an exhibit of women in leather from the One Archive inside the tent to introduce a lot of the generation about other women that have been kinky through, in Los Angeles, and other groups, and seeing themselves reflected back at them. That no, they weren't perverts, and these people continued to have healthy lives. And we had workshops and classes on rope tying, consent. I feel like you could never have too many workshops on consent. But it has been a success every year. This is one of the oldest flyers. The Eagle has been a big home to Dyke Day for its fundraising. And everybody's like, this is such a great party. How come we don't do this all the time? And after that, I think that's when Cruise came about. It became an actual monthly party. I think I'm losing it here.
Come sit with Ron and then.
Oh, okay, okay. I don't know if I'm just gonna start rambling.
Thank you so much. It's a kind of perfect transition for us to think together and have the two of you talk, and we'll keep Madison's DJing in our minds and Judy's incredible documentation.
How do you follow that?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. But I think, we're in this space of the museum. We're not in the club, although we probably would like to be. And I wonder if that's a place that we can start. I know the two of you have collaborated so much, but you've also created and curated so much space where bodies have come together, where people have found each other, and I love that you even allude to kind of conflict and that we have to work through things together. That's what we have to do in the queer communities. And so I wonder if we can just kind of start by thinking a little bit about nightlife, and even just that phrase, the compounding of nightlife. It's this total scene, a form of world making. And maybe we can think a little about Platinum Oasis. So it started in 2001.
Well, me and Vad used to do a monthly performance club at Zen Sushi on Hyperion called GIMP Unlimited.
Yes.
And between the two of us, we knew everybody who came through town.
Yeah.
To be like, Voluptuous Horror, Karen Black, Lydia Lunch, Nicole Blackman, on and on. And so that was mostly just for fun and to make something happen with music, installation art, and live performance. But then Shari Freelo was at Outfest then and invited us to do the Platinum Party, which was the experimental wing of Outfest, because we weren't really the people to come to with coming out stories or something. Give us psychedelia, queer psychedelia, not the feel good stuff. So we just had an idea that what makes an event is to do something that's not done before. So to enter taboo space. And taboo space at that time was the Coral Sands Motel, which was a motel that basically just people on crystal meth went and filmed, extreme action parties. And good girls didn't go there. Genetic girls didn't go there. Tourists didn't go there. It was basically when we were setting up, if you pulled a bed against the wall, it'd be 4 hypodermic syringes and a dirty dildo had hit the floor in 40 rooms. So it was amazing that they really backed us up even on the search and negotiating with, went to a lot of bathhouses trying to crack that space and go back to the Bette Midler days at Continental Baths was one of our influences. But also being masochists, we wanted to do a 24-hour party. So we had 40 rooms, a 12-hour stage because they made us stop at midnight. We started again with a gospel brunch in the morning and the filthy polysexual jacuzzi. It was magic, and it was one of those things that was greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is what a happening is supposed to be when you do a lot of curating, but also do a lot of inviting. I think it was Kenny Scharf came uninvited with his art Winnebago with the B-52s inside and asked to plug in. You know, like this, people just did interventions on the space.
And so then what was it like for you, Pony? 10 years later, you were invited to perform and kind of activate another iteration.
I mean, we didn't do 24 hours. Those were the diehard days. But we did it at the Alexandria Hotel, which, you know, is like its own haunt. And that night, actually, somebody did fall off the banister and crack their head open. That was the closer of the night. Yeah, it was a little scary. But there was so much going on, and LA at the time, I don't think had that much stuff kind of coming alive. So it was very needed, but also that was around the time Mustache Mondays was also kicking off.
Yeah.
And so Mustache, unless you were gonna, stay up till like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, then, but not everybody, has that luxury. Or, unless you're performing or you're doing something. So I think that LA queer life was definitely struggling to like find a footing, at least something consistent. And Mustache was definitely set the tone.
Can you tell us about that?
Mustache Mondays, that was done by Nacho Nava, who I met. God, we were like teens when we met. And he used to work at Tower Records at the time. And I don't think his family knew he was even out. But he loved music so much. He loved how music changed people. He loved the influence that it had and the energy that it could just give people. And he created a night called Mustache Mondays, and he highlighted some of LA's like underground artists, performance artists. God, I'm trying to remember how many performers came out of that. I could think of dozens, but I don't even remember where to start.
Because it went on for a few decades, so yeah, there's different corners of Mustache.
And Nacho always found some dilapidated warehouse or some spot that nobody knew about and just managed to make it magic. And every night a Mustache happened was magic.
Yeah, I mean, there's something so kind of specific about being in these, like you're saying, kind of a space that isn't a theater. I had the incredible opportunity to see Ron's Encephalous Monster performance this weekend, and when you sit in a theater, black box kind of setup, it's so different than encountering performance.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a tight, sweaty nightclub, I mean, you are smelling everything. You are smelling the funk. You are smelling, but you're taking it in. You might get some sweat from somebody else on you, and it's recharging. It's recharging, and I feel that it fucks with the psyche in some way. I like to think that it opens it up, just bit by bit, like it chips away at it. Because whether you see performance that one night and then you come back 10 years to see it again, it changes you. It shifts you every single time. So, I feel that LA, coming out of this or moving through this pandemic slowly, as frustrating as it has been by having so many shows canceled and things, we're still gonna figure out a way out of it. We're still gonna, find a way to make out, find a way to be intimate, find a way to dance, hug each other, even if it's, from behind. But we're still, I think it's all in us.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to ask both of you about how you've negotiated this time of the pandemic, which has been so much about a kind of closing in, and even yet there have been, moments of new mediated connection. But, being together in space is something that we all really crave. And I think, queers, as queers, we have always had to negotiate consent and what it means to stay in community with people. Mm-hmm. And so kind of thinking about how to create safety for ourselves, even as you said, Ron, this is probably pandemic 1 of 10 that's headed our way. I'm kind of like a nihilist, I'm sorry. But, we gotta move through it. So, and all of these spaces, I don't know what's happened with crews since during the time of Corona, spaces have been left empty. And so, kind of negotiating the digital, the live.
We tried, I think Cruise really tried to, I think a lot of people or clubs were doing like online happy hour, what is that, like Zoom nights, and I was just like, no, this is depressing, this is fucked up. I don't want any of this. And I refuse, everybody, is Cruise gonna do something? I'm like, no, this is fucked up. This is playing with our minds, and I don't want to do that. So
It's not sexy enough.
it's not sexy enough. But what we did do is we're like, how do we use this technology? It's the only way that some of us are staying close together. So we actually had like weekly check-ins with some of the figures and bartenders and DJs of the night, or of crews that have been in crews. Sometimes it was the go-go dancer, and at the rise of BLM and the shit that was happening in the world, we made sure that we gave the spotlight to our folks of color, the Black members in our cruise community, and just chatted with them. Just fucking talk to them. How are you doing today? Shitty. Awesome. And then eventually some giggles would happen. And, people felt connected. And then, of course, I just got too fucking tired. I was trying to deal with my own mental health. But, I like to think of that as that was something, and we have to find a new something.
Yeah, I think of how a lot of drag performers kind of turn to the internet, and it's reminiscent of Madison I love that we can see their kitchen in the background. But it's like you get dressed up, you perform for the internet, and then you close the laptop and walk away.
I was crossing my fingers for a cat to walk by or something.
Exactly.
I would like to say part of the way I look at clubs historically and how they've not just informed me, but culture. A lot of people don't acknowledge that the laws changed. So when I was 15, any night of the week I could go to Catch One, the Odyssey, Gino's 2, and stay out till 6 in the morning dancing 7 days a week with people that, there were people there up to 40, so you'd go home, go to some French dude's house with Coke and Quaaludes and then come back on the dance floor and then drive back to Pomona just in time to take a shower and blow dry your hair for school.
Yep.
So I grew up really different, and then there was kind of no generation gap for a long time because I didn't want to talk to a 16-year-old. I was already more adult than that. So after the Mies Commission report happened under Reagan, the law stricken so much it's taboo to even have a teenage friend, which kind of ended certain types of mentorship early. The other curse of California is the alcoholic beverage control with the 2 a.m. curfew, with the no nudity anywhere liquor is being served, which was like an anti-stripper law that filtered into cabaret things. So there's always this warning when you're doing zany performance art in a techno club that you could get arrested under these alcohol beverage control laws. So things do have to stay a little bit under. But I believe in pushing them. And some, the last space I thought that was really influential, and I found out over time, because first I thought it was cheesy, but Club Fuck became too popular for this tiny space. So they sputtered off into Cinematic in West Hollywood, in a space Peanuts, which also had the Monday and Friday drag shows. But there, which had, going from 100 capacity, 600, they just had one of those hot dog machines rolling, so they served food that no one ever ordered, so 18 and over could go in there. But there was a playroom with quite hardcore action, but because you could be in there with a hot dog, it was okay. And there were so many San Fernando Valley kinky teenagers that really grew up in that scene. I'm still really close with them. Most of that core group of about 20 people.
I think
sweet.
that's... Yeah, that was one thing that we talked about because Cruise is returning next month for the first time, was that there wasn't going to be any backroom shenanigans, at least not by the party, because of the liabilities. Every establishment is so terrified to the potential to lose their licenses, their business, or be fined or anything like that. So whatever shenanigans are going to have to happen on the stage with a certain protocol. But before, it was like, it was free game. There'd be trampling, there'd be ass smacking, there's like tits flying out, there's like, it was a free for all. And now that's going to have to change. And also, certain people have a capacity to be out for a half hour, that's it. Yeah. So, you
got to turn out new ones.
there's more 21-year-olds the past 2 years now that are thirsty for some action. So, yeah.
I think, when I was thinking about club space and, like you said, just bodies sweating and smelling each other, just that physical proximity and closeness. There was a term that Amelia used in queer communion that I found really generative. She talked about over proximity. This idea of being really close to your archive, Ron, that, had a kind of like, how do you think through that closeness? And it's actually a really exciting problem to have, to be kind of too close to things. And, the over proximity of the archive that you had your 6,000 books down to 1,000 and kind of having to think through, it's almost like it's a good sort of method, I almost think about this idea of over proximity. And so I wonder if that term is something that we can kind of think through in this moment where we've been really far apart from each other, in a really challenging way, I think, for people's mental health and just sanity in general as a culture, as we kind of return to something. How do we kind of balance distance and proximity?
We need shows, but we also need I feel like for a long time I've just keep going to clubs that are for like teenage dancers and, drinking and dancing. It's only one loud room, and I needed an adult club like Jackie 60 where there's like a stage with a reading, modern dance, performance art. There's a loud dance room, and then there's a room full of stinky sofas where you're with somebody like Kathleen Turner on coke going, darling. But, I feel like there's not enough vision in life. Nightlife always becomes corporate. Yes. Maybe New York, like how can every party be a Suzanne Barsh party left at this time and part? Where's people with ideas bringing them forward instead of formulas? Is that a real place?
No, not yet.
I haven't had enough virtuality. I've had it.
No, Marcus is and Michelle Carr's idea of a club where the music is just the right pitch. There is seating for everybody. The
But
drinks.
I said adult, not geriatric.
There would be other dancers.
I love it.
Well, I want to give space for the audience to kind of chime in here, but I want to ask one more question about sort of the everyday forms of caretaking that happen. You both showed these incredible performances where there's bodily modification, there's kind of working through the endurance of pain, there's all the forms of care, caring for an archive, putting together an exhibition, but also, I think the salon, the space that's like a safer or a space that's trying to generate, just like the tactility of touching somebody's hair, of being in connection to their body, of making them feel, good about themselves. That's such a kind of a beautiful act, and I'm thinking of Judy's COVID meal deliveries, just these everyday things that sustain our existence and our practice, as the term survivance indicates, through a lot of pain and difficulty and the kind of rages of the eviction and all of these kinds of things. So kind of everyday things that are keeping you both sustained.
My link to anything tender is I do structural body work, and sometimes full time for stints of time. Yeah. So it's the kind of like Rolfing meets Wilhelm Reich meets deep tissue. It's like slow deep sessions. And compared to when my other hustle was the newspaper, where it's just kind of like more art and tedium, it's actually this other part of me that fixes me. And I like that connection, the bodies, and not thinking about myself, but trying to channel the skills I have in moving tissue and separating tissue. And that leads me into a more like holistic community. Because, I can go in the other direction too, so it's nice to have support to be good and do more natural healing and things like that. I find that really supportive, and one of the things I love about LA. Like when the 6 years I lived in London, like it's just you know, everyone loves it if you're just a mess, like you're just drunk again, like, oh, she's trolleyed again. You know, it's like an identity that's acceptable, whereas here I feel like you kind of ostracize and supported at the same time, or you have a smaller group if you want to just stay messy. But yeah, I need support personally.
I feel that touch it has been such a healing thing, whether it is something, you know, hand on the knee or one on the shoulder, just touch in general has been very healing. And you know, I'm grateful I get to touch folks all day, but in order to fill my cup, I have to get some exercise. I have to go for walks. I have to go and do something that is meditative in some way, because in me touching other people, in me working on folks, there's something really satisfying of feeling groomed, being cared for, being taken care of. And that only recharges them to go out in the world, to spend an extra hour out, or peruse the market just for a little bit longer than we normally would, instead of just, running in and out. And I'm glad that we're not at the place where people are dropping off food anymore. And even though it's been a frustrating 18 months, that the extremes that we were in the first 6 months have gotten a little lighter, even with this, like the delta betas and whatnot. So I think that I'm really grateful to at least see a little bit of change. It's not as, I still cry every once in a while, but it's just what we're in.
No, the beginning before the election, and
Oh my God.
I have a little seizure thinking about it. So, yeah, getting to be in a space with people together is something that's really exciting and feels kind of new in this strange way.
Well, even when I've had dinner with friends, and whether it's indoor, outdoor, or I feel regenerated. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm skipping all weekend, wee, even though I'm exhausted probably. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just a little bit of hope, I guess.
So we have a little time, and I would love to invite people to maybe stand up and share a question for Ron or Pony, or comment. As we hear the sirens.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much. I actually was thinking of Judy Sisneros and your comment right now about election. I just wanted to remind everyone, this opportunity that we're in the middle of a recall election right now, too. So if you haven't voted, make sure to vote. I know ICA also will let social justice missions become as a polling place. I don't know if you can talk about that here, but can they? We're not for this particular thing, But if you didn't register yet online to get ballot by mail, you missed the deadline yesterday. So, but you can vote in person. No, they sent ballots. But they sent ballots after the majority votes.
But if you didn't get a ballot, like I didn't get one for some reason, but early voting starts September 4th. So go vote on September 4th or soon thereafter.
And then I guess that leads me to a question or a thought, just to kind of think about hope of progress, and looking back at some of those Proposition 8 and other moments of crises in the history that you're talking about, Los Angeles and California and politics, if you want to speak to maybe things that still give you hope.
Yeah.
Or solace. Thank you.
Well, since I could be a Debbie Downer about that, let's talk about how I deal with it, because I think we all have our own activist inside of us, and no one needs to ride me and tell me I need to join anything. I didn't join ACT UP, didn't join Queer Nation, but I did the occasional march with them. I went to Sacramento for AB 101. There were a lot of sexual politics. I felt like I was acting out in a very visible way, and about being a person with HIV at that time, which now seems like what? You know, the only issue with HIV now is someone cute with PrEP on the end of their tongue, like saying, hi. You know, like it's hard to like keep bending with the changes of the world you live in. What does surprise me sometimes is when I perceive that everyone looks all the way at the president and the world and everything all the time, and they're really upset about where they sit within it. Like, do you ever hear about the bubble, about the group, about the community, about thriving within your own thing? And to make it, and actually truly understanding that thing is going to always be more important and more rich and more transformative in your life than having perfect national politics or something, in the way I live. Like, I'm not trying to pull people out of politics, but I'm not going to stay awake crying over the world. After I'm 60 this year. Yeah, I do get sick of the same issue, you know, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward, that sort of thing, and constantly being sold mediocrity as the other option to the hideousness. So, yeah. I could be more radical or despondent, and those are just honestly sides of me that I go through at different times. But let's normalize sex work in this category called incels. You know, that's something that breaks my heart when I read about it. In a way, I just think, God, these people are never going to learn how to like communicate and move forward, and there has to be like a bridge, a surrogate. I mean, I even had a surrogate during COVID with an agreement with someone that wasn't quite up my alley. I believe it has to be normalized so people aren't crawling out of their skin, and there shouldn't be shame around you not pulling, and you know, I just think it should be much more normalized. Thought I'd sneak that in.
I think I agree with the, like, we focus on things like the president. I've never, like, as soon as I was able to vote, I didn't know what the hell I was voting for, you know, because it was out of my control. I thought they were all bullshit anyways. I'd never agreed with the president, or, you know, I never stood up for the national anthem. I never did a Pledge of Allegiance. You know, that has never been a part of me, and I think the things that are tangible, the things that we can reach, the communities that we can reach are the most important to us. Those are the ones that I reserve my energy for, because I can't save the world, but I can have a good, intimate conversation with a person right in front of me. And to me, that's the biggest value. That's the one I value most at the end of the day. So.
Other questions? Oh, yeah. Do you want to stand up, maybe? Thank you.
Hi. So my question was prompted by something that you both said a little bit ago about the changes in the law and the way that nightlife culture, nightclub culture changed as a result. I'm really interested in this issue of intergenerational queer community and how perceived, it seems to me, by perception, that it's much harder now for there to be intergenerational queer community, and really that it's much harder for younger people to access that community. So I can experience an intergenerational community that includes everyone from people in their late 20s to people in their late 80s, but those young people in their teens and early 20s are not able to access that. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, both how has intergenerational community meant something to you in your life and what those communities are that you've created? And maybe if you have anything to offer to young people in terms of how they might also access that community when things are so closed off still right now. Thank you.
That's a tough one. I feel like I'm of a generation where I'm not too big on social media, and the younger generation is so attached to a YouTuber or somebody, a character, but they're all real characters. There's really no real person. So I guess that's a really tough one. But I feel that, like, I missed the chance to know a generation of people that I would have learned so much from because of the AIDS epidemic. And, you know, or the drug overdoses, or, you know, just fucking bad living. So that's a really tough one to kind of like answer, I guess, in some way.
Well, I think sometimes it can come back to the art practice, because we're not going to back up the alcohol drinking, like the gay bar, alcoholic center of all social things that was around when I was, 70s and 80s going out. But I think of, the last Euro tour I did, I was based myself in Athens in Greece, and there was a kind of crusty community center called Communitism that, like voguing troops rehearse at, and there's like the drag mother schools all their children there, and they have a homeless clothes washing program there. Like it's properly like a squat community sort of thing, and because I did all the, like a museum, a dance festival, like I did all these cross things, I thought, well, in that lineup, this one is to like plug into there. And by spending 3 days with the people there, I did feel like I also started relationships I still have. You just end up with so many children after a while. You have to think of it as the experience while you're having it, but I think sometimes you have to bend to reach out and not just keep going forward.
But yeah, finding people to be, I guess, in relationship with when we can't even be in space together, that is a tricky one.
And not complaining about the differences all the time. Like, I think everyone needs to chill out. Like, we're our own worst enemies now, which that didn't used to be true. And I think there is, I just want to say the difference that can pluck me, because I think, like, we were kicked out and rolled down the hill with things thrown after us, and bottles broke over. I had just for looking less than this, like in 1979 onwards. And I think I have young friends now that were loved by their parents and loved through their transition, even underage. And they're like love childs, and they don't understand the angst in that we're like fuck you queer rather than unicorn queer. And that's the origin of it. Don't erase us.
I love that.
Don't erase us. We fucking...
Yeah.
There's a lot of fights that have already been fought, and they're invisible now, like Operation Spanner in England, all this, the NEA stuff that's documented here, which there's so much distance now, and the context of art is so different that I don't feel any tension from it. It's almost this abstract thing that happened that's not relevant anymore. But then when I see that against the England one, which I also had to deal with, when that became my next base, I thought, God, I was like slugging it out. You just do what's in front of you politically. I didn't want to defend the notion of government arts funding, because I find it kind of creepy too. I find the favorite 15 people on every grantee list creepy. I find the whole alternative systems creepy. So you just slide in where you can, and I don't in so many places. I'm about to bust out my punk era DIY. Like, don't wait for it. Make it happen. Do a fundraiser. I don't care if you have a degree. You didn't get a gallery. You have to work for it now. You really make things if you have a fire in your ass. Okay.
Pass me the water.
Any final questions, comments, love letters? I think queerism.
I want to say a love letter to you three, and to Judy and to Madison. Madison really set us off on the right path, and I'm so sad they can't be here. And it is partly because of precarities. I just wanted to mention that it is, we expect everyone to be able to be everywhere at all times, and that's an unreasonable expectation, as we've learned with COVID at this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.